All right. Well, thank you all for showing up here. I picked up Jer's white paper and I was looking at the architecture and I saw something that looked very familiar, a little line that said evidence store. Jer, I don't know if you know what the Ortelius team has been up to, but we are all about gathering pipeline, both security and DevOps data, and starting to do reporting on it and aggregating it up to what we like to call the logical application in a microservices environment. All of these pieces and parts get more complicated when we decouple. And so we've been focused on solving the problem around decoupled environments. But what I thought we would do today is just to share some information about the kind of evidence that we're storing and the kind of evidence that you're storing. We are really working towards getting a consensus in terms of what is the evidence that should be federated and managed over time, historically versioned and tracked. For example, a really good example of it is an SBOM. SBOMs are done at the component level in microservices, and pulling that information up and generating literally a federated view of an SBOM for an entire organization, or an SBOM for an application, or an SBOM for an environment. So that's the kind of conversations we've been having. So I was kind of hoping you would share with us what your evidence store looks like, and what we might do is share with you what we're doing and see where there's where the data is overlapping, where we're agreeing, and what we're missing.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, because obviously Fatih will know this. So we've a really old set of technologies, like any good old-fashioned enterprise that's been around for a long time. For which source code, we have a single system finally, but for CI/CD we have many systems, and I would say we have varying practices that teams do within those systems. And one of the challenges when we took over this group about a couple of years ago was we spent a fortune on audits, reviews are app by app. So literally someone has to sit down with every application team and manually review their processes with them. And because really there had nothing and we couldn't prove anything. And we know teams were doing things that they didn't necessarily do. And with any control gates, as we embarked on our cloud journey, we were trying our best to figure out that, could we set a set of standards that people had to do in order to go to cloud? And again, it was simple bypass those types of controls that we had in place, or intentionally and unintentionally, as we subsequently started to discover. So one of the things we've started working on was, can we capture the data that happens when people are developing? And as that development and that code gets carried through all of the CI/CD processes and ultimately ends up in production. And if we're able to harness it, how are we able to put it together, stitch it together in a way that makes sense? And then how can we use that information for, is it engineering maturity? Is it some sort of analysis, metrics, insights, performance, latency, production support? If there's an incident, how do you track back if a change is made, or compliance, audit, risk, right? If we've got regulated applications, how do I prove beyond doubt that I'm compliant with the particular regulation that application might be subject to? We have obviously internal audits. How do I prove that my application and my code and my processes and my deployments are compliant with the internal Fidelity controls and policies from risks or security, etc. So we started with source code management systems, and we said, okay, well, what do developers do, right? So, well, they commit code, they push codes, they create PRs, they review, they add comments, they merge. A pipeline kicks off, and a pipeline could do one, many, or nothing, right? We've no clue. Sonar scans, are they being done? Are they not being done? Are the results being, ignored, or the results actually being, actioned on, like, stop the build, etc. And all the way to the, the artifacts we create, the life cycle of an artifact through mutability to immutability, and then ultimately how do I know when somebody deploys something or not, and am I able then to track that all the way back? So we started with source code, so we're capturing all of the events that happen in GitHub and Bitbucket. We're moving to GitHub. So in GitHub, so when people do things, we're capturing those events and we're logging. We put them into a ledger. So every kind of SCM ledger, and then we have a CI ledger, a CD ledger, and then we on the back end of that ledger where we've got we're joining to get data together. So commits are linked to PRs, are linked to code reviews, are linked to maybe a CI pipeline, and then linked to an artifact or artifacts, and etc. So and then when a pipeline is running, we wanted to know what they're doing. So are they running sonar, are they running unit tests, are they running performance tests, are they running chaos tests, are they running integration tests? Just insights into what they're doing. Are they publishing artifacts? Are they releasing artifacts or promoting artifacts? So within our pipelines, we have this eventing model that if you use our standardized pipelines, our pipeline libraries, we have eventing in behind. So where anything that happens in a pipeline, we actually event out what it is, and different metadata associated with it. And if it generated any files, we're actually capturing those files out of the pod, and we're storing them in S3, and we're providing those references back to them as well. So everything that happens, we capture an event of that thing, and we log that again. And we have the SHAs that we're able to link everything down up together and build that picture of from literally commit to production deployment and everything in between. So that's kind of where we're at. And then the goal is, once we have this data, is provide it to people for their use cases. So in our case, we want to govern production deployments. So have you any secrets? Have you run a code scan? Is your open source up to date? Have you ticked and checked all the boxes that somebody says you have to do? And only then allow that change go to production if all those things are true based on evidence. Audit can come in then for, like, we've got SOC regulations. So SOC 1 is our first regulatory requirement. We want to say, okay, why don't I go into a dashboard and see, is this production deployment compliant or not? And it should just be a tick box or an X, right? So I don't need to pay our external auditors millions of dollars a year to run around after each individual team to determine whether they are or not. If I can get it, hey, look at this, there's a checkbox, yes or no, and maybe they just do some sampling to verify it, right? So security, how does security get insights in production support? There's an incident, hey, was there a change? Yes or no. If there's a change, oh my God, like most likely. And then the support team then, or the app team, can go, okay, here's the change, most likely causes, here's all the commits that were part of that. So, again, time to resolution would be much faster, because now they've got a nice little kind of boundary around what's most likely, and they're not, so they have a place to start, right? They're not gone, they don't have to go trawling through ringing people or whatever. So that's the type of stuff we're after and at. And I know I talked to Fatigue before. This isn't unique to me or Fidelity, right? We built a Jenkins plugin. We contributed that because that's standard. Everything we're doing within Jenkins is pretty standard, right? I don't think there's anything we're doing. We use Amazon, so we use some Amazon tech, but they could easily be swapped in and out with other, variants of.
And where does the eventing come from? The publishing of events or broadcasting events come from the plugin then, or?
Yeah, so what we did was, if you're familiar with Jenkins, you can have like the pipeline library, and you can have the catalog. So in the library, what we did was every var we create, or every function we created in that, we wrapped it in a closure, right? So called with eventing, and then we have an eventing plugin that we deploy on all the team controllers within our Jenkins instances. So
got it.
As that happens, the closure it gets executed in the plugin, then gets that data that's emit. We just emit everything, and then it then publishes it out. Because we run on Amazon, the publish out then we have the lambdas are listening for the published events, and we just use Dynamo.
Yeah.
So it's
And are you signing those events yet? Have you looked at doing a
Not-
signature on the event themselves?
not yet, no. We haven't, no, we haven't even thought about signing anything across the board yet, because well, first of all, we don't have certain technologies we have are so out of date, we need to upgrade them. But we haven't signed events, and we probably will sign something at some point, but do we need to sign individual? These are all immutable, so no one can, the event gets generated, it gets logged into what we call a ledger. So that's an immutable store. And
Right.
we post process then out of the ledger. So we have a bunch of subscribers sitting on the, we have a bunch of subscribers sitting on the ledger listening for events. And then they're doing some transformations, and they eventually then create the evidence store records for whatever it is. And, I got a PR, sorry, I've got a code review. Okay, well, what does that link back to? It'll go to the ledger. The ledger will then it gets picked up by the processor and says, okay, here's a code review. Okay, here's the SHA of the PR.
And then you can start associating everything together.
We start associating everything together. If we did Sonar Cube, for example, and we use, there we go. We use CD events. We're using CD events as the backbone of every type of event we're catching. So we're adding to CD events where we might want to extend something, or if there's a new event, we're adding to that. Yeah, so we're able to stitch everything together, and then we should be able to build that picture from the initial commits to when those commits appear in production, and be able to go from left to right and right to left.
Right. Cool.
Did you take a look at any value stream tools to do what you're talking about?
For like value stream management, no, we didn't. We didn't use one tool, because obviously we've got 4 or 5 different vendor-based tools running all these platforms.
Right.
But we were interested in the raw data, like value stream mapping tools.
What was
like Clitora, Digital AI has them. They're pretty focused on managing door metrics. And we've had, we're doing some work with the Texas office of the Attorney General, and they're asking for some very similar data that you just defined, which we're building out in the what we like to call our compliance scorecard. I haven't seen that kind of data. The kind of data you're specifying, I think, is pretty critical. And I was just curious if you'd look to see if any of the value stream tools are starting to think about tracking that data.
No, and I know the tools, like we looked at, we not necessarily looked at a particular value stream mapping tool from a vendor, because we already used them with CloudBees. But what I tended to find with some of these tools is they were fantastic within their own scope, their own boundary from the inputs to the exits, but they had no visibility about what might have happened outside of their own tool. So the DORA metrics were implied, like, and I'm 100% certain this, but I can't prove it yet, and I think people would be shocked here when I do prove it, is how do I know for my developers what code they commit, how much of it does not get into the hands of a customer?
It's very interesting. That was one of the questions that this customer asked. They have contractors, and they wanted to see actually how many commits that they made that actually is being pushed out.
Yeah.
Or how many, if they made any commits, period.
So if they hired a project team of 12 developers and they only had 3, and they're paying for 12 developers, but they look at the commits and only 3 people are actually doing the work, that's a red flag for management to look at.
It is like another use case we have here. And again, I'm not that I'm anti-metrics, but I think some metrics are so gamed, like, what's the one, time to market, or the, and people measure it by JIRA. Right? When did I start the epic and when did I end the epic? And I go, well, And now you get it subjective to a team. Go, well, what's the final story? Is it go, it's staged, right? And the majority of people said I've staged that the artifact is now up in releases or whatever you want to put it. But when does it actually end up in production and in the hands of somebody? So they use these start and stop things in Jira, and they go, that's how they measure velocity. And I go, well, did it end up in production in a week, 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, ever? And then we just don't know. So again, that's another one. Another big pet peeve of mine is, like, I don't know if you've dealt with SOC applications, but one of the things is more than one a developer cannot push a a code change into production without another review happening, right? So that's one of the regulations as part of a SOC thing. So just stop me or you or anybody just writing some code and just pushing it to production. And so people use code reviews or separation of duty in Active Directory. Well, I wrote the code, so I can't press the button. So Tracy, I ring you, hey Tracy, that code's in there, press the button. And I go, well, that doesn't de-risk anything. You've just pressed the button that you've no idea. It's like to think, did you pack your own bag at the airport? And even code reviews is, I see it all the time. I go, hey, I just put the PR up, can someone approve it? And the developer just goes approve, right? So I'd love to do deep analysis on, quality of code review process and, versus lines of code, and, how much has changed in the thing that we're reviewing. So 30-second review might be okay if there was one code line or one line change, but a 30-second review of 100 lines changed is obviously just a checkbox. So, and getting into that level of engineering analysis, so we can prove that we're reducing risk. We're trying to increase quality of of what we deploy into production, and all of this data. That's why I say there's so many use cases that this data can open up. Just again, engineering, production support, triage, compliance, security. There's a ton of them there.
Yeah, and I keep talking to people about, the data is so important in order for us to build policies. You can't build policies without data. And we have to have a way to start federating the information into one location so we can actually create actionable data. And centralizing the logs tends to be, I've been working on a CD events white paper, and one of the comments that Fatih had made is that the CD events has the potential even to bring in testing logs, right? To centralize the data around the testing logs so that we can have access to the testing logs. So there is so much data that we have the potential to pull in. We have recently, most recently, been really focused on some of the security tooling. So like the sonar scans and whatnot, we've brought in and we've added to the scorecard. But we're starting to now look at like the OpenSSF scorecard. Have you guys looked at any of the security kind of steps to track that information?
No, and the OpenSSF scorecards is on something to review. So one of our challenges is with, for example, we use JFrog, right? We're on such an old version. Actually, it's a year out of date as it is. So we're unable even to do some basic stuff like security scanning and things like that, the binaries on what we're bringing in from the open source community. So we haven't gone there yet, because I think we've more core fundamental things to fix first. And then, so like we want to get to signing artifacts. We want to get to, how do we verify what open source packages we do bring in? And, we allow people to download things from the internet, right? So pretty hard to sign anything or prove anything when developers or build machine are free to download them from their desktop, or download them like curl wget from within something.
They may not even know they're downloading, and they
Correct.
create an image, and it's not something they're doing in a malicious way. They're just trying to do
Correct.
their job. They're just trying to get their job done.
Yeah, so we fundamentals there to fix, but security is, obviously it's unfortunately it's getting easier and easier to be caught out. unintentionally. So
I
how
know.
do we, so our first things is just make sure we have the right, we've as many protections as we can in place. And that's kind of where we're focused at now versus maybe the data or the signings, or even if we can just be able to protect ourselves from scanning everything and making sure we as we bring in things, it's all been scanned.
Do you scan your repos currently?
We do now on anything that's in our GitHub repository. We're scanning them all, but we want to put SAS, right? I want to put code QL on everything.
Yeah.
But we have, at least we have secrets being worked on now, and we've an SCA tool in place, so we have that scanning. But we just scan, right?
Yeah, I know. It's only it's a small level of defense, but it's something, right?
It's something, correct.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like help make it better. And then how do you, like, one of the things like, if you never had scanning before, or you only had scanning on a partial set of your portfolio, then like there's going to be huge amount of true positives in the findings of these scans of applications that have been scanned before, but the remediation of those could be quite sizable. So how do you balance risk versus tech debt and mandating of people updating something or not, or just kind of at least what we've done now is raise the visibility and provided transparency into the code from a security perspective or a version perspective.
Yes.
Um,
Speaking of version perspective, when you grab the data, at what point do you do that? At the point in time that the build is done?
So right now, we have SCAs. So when SCA is scanned on a PR, so that's the only time we're doing it right now. We want to push that back into the initial download. So when, like, ultimately, if an SCA tool is scanning something, it's most likely on the developer's laptop. So if there is something wrong with it, then it's already in the system. What we'd like to do is push that into the into the package managers and say, hey, I've got this package manager, run npm install or run maven install, whatever. It's then going externally, and we're scanning it as it comes in the front door, and then making a decision there and then to decide to allow in or not. So that is our intention long term. But that requires a little bit more work, especially around networking and stuff.
And you're grabbing info at the deployment. Are you grabbing where it's deployed?
Yes, we will be. Yeah, we're just we did CI first, and then we're moving into the CD patterns now. So we'll be for deployment, we're going to be capturing things like, whatever our control gates are, we decide to put in. We're going to obviously capture all of those, the events related to those control gates, so we have the evidence of what were the inputs to the control gates and what was the output of the control gates. When you're deploying, who deployed, what's the actor that's doing the deployment, or if it's assuming something, what is it assuming and doing the deployment, what was deployed, and where is it being deployed. So is it into which cloud provider? Is it what's the ID of that account or subscription, etc. And we can probably link it, and we can link it to the artifact that was deployed and what technology type it was. The next logical thing might be, do you get down into the next granular level? So if you're going into AWS, for example, you're using Terraform or CloudFormation, it can deploy a multitude of things. So how do you, we obviously we'll know what the CloudFormation template or Terraform template artifact is, but how do we next link that to the physical resources and those resource IDs of what was put in? So we're stopping at the deployment artifact and say, this is the thing that was deployed. Obviously you can go in and read that and say, what did it create or what did it update? But the next logical step after for us then would be if we can get down to the actual resources that were touched by that deployment.
And when you grab that data, do you do a version on a SHA or a release number or some way of identifying that particular object, a container?
Yeah, we will. So in the So we up to CI/CD. So everything is SHA based. So we have the commit SHAs, the PR SHAs, they're linked to the commits. We can link all them. SonarQube actually does give you, I can't remember which ID it is, but SonarQube does give you be able to link back to your Git. I think it's I'm pretty sure it's the PR SHA. But you can link there. And then in our pipeline, obviously we have the SHAs, the Git SHAs, so we're able to link, and then we're storing, I can't remember the identifier, but in Jenkins, there's a unique identifier. So we're able to use that for the pipeline, and we're able to thread all stages that happen in the pipeline. And then when we publish up the artifact, we have those binaries, and we're decorating the artifact as well. So we'll have all of the IDs. Now, ultimately, we will be signing the artifacts when we upgrade, because JFrog provides signing at that level. So we'll be able to sign things and then be able to store that signature as well. So we're able, because because every event is triggering and we have the same ID, we're able to, like, we can stamp the unique build ID, the identifier, on the artifact that created it, so that then we can go from the artifact back into the builds, or we can go for the builds into the artifacts.
And then do you track ownership? Who to call if there's a problem?
So yeah, so we run ServiceNow. I suppose a lot of companies do. So in that, we have we call it a product model. So we have like a business unit, and we have a product line, and then there's a product, and then there's an app. So each is ID. So at that level, it's all app IDs. So we have the app ID as it's going through, because we make, what we have done here is, when you create a repository, for example, you have to have the app ID. So we're able to associate that then back to a set of contacts.
Right.
And even a ServiceNow, for us, it could even go back into the ServiceNow assignment group, because we'd know the assignment group of that application too.
So you're pulling a lot of that ownership data from ServiceNow, or at least pointing to it.
We'd point to it. Someone would be able to reference back to it if they wanted to. There's an API.
Anything we can point to, we do. Ortelius now manages the ownership, because we're trying to provide it. We don't know if they're using ServiceNow or not.
or some other system. We're wedded to it, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, I think most developers would say unfortunately, but
I know, but it does create a lot of it. For better or for worse, it does what it's supposed to do. And on the support side of the house, they love it. Absolutely love it.
Production team, the production support do.
We didn't schedule enough time really for this call to show you what we're doing with Ortelius. Could we do a follow-up call? I believe that there are some items that you may not have completed yet that we've already done. And of course, we would love for you to be an adopter of Ortelius. I don't know if there is a good integration with what you already have done, or if there's a way that we can help you finish the project. But we would love to be able to have that discussion, or at minimum, get some feedback from you on what we have accomplished so far with how we're gathering evidence. Now, keep in mind, Ortelius is thinking about we can support any kind of object. We can support a file, any kind of file system. We can support database objects, SQL statements, and we can support containers. So those are sort of the three objects. While we could support monoliths without a problem, where we really shine is when it's decoupled.
Okay, yeah.
Because the decoupling, just everything you just told us in a monolith, it becomes even more complicated in microservices, because you have all these teams creating feature sets. Now you have a giant hairball, or as I used to call it, a giant Death Star of dependencies. And we're working with the Salsa team at Google and Guac to start pulling in the package dependencies, which is even a bigger Death Star. And we're thinking how we can use that data to better refine our blast radius information. If something down in some package gets updated, how does it trickle up?
Yeah.
Those kinds of conversations, that's what we're having. And we're also working with Red Hat to build a universal object reference. So instead of having different repos, you would have a single, basically extended OCI registry for your objects. So we are looking at solving the artifact issue, the data gathering issue, and the dependency issue throughout that platform. And I think we've been thinking about it for a while. It sounds like you have too. So I'd love to get your feedback on the Ortelius platform itself.
Yeah, what we can do is we could set up a follow-on. We're away next week. I'm in the US next week, but I'd like to bring in some more a couple of the people who are actually working on the team itself, because obviously they'll actually be able to say, well, we do this or do that or do the other thing. They can give more depth. But yeah, and we could see then if there's opportunities of because like the thing we have is big, and the team is only so big, right? So they can only go as fast. So if there are things out there that can complement and and be part of the overall solution, then we're because it crosses so many things anyway, so we don't build everything ourselves. So it there could be an opportunity, and then obviously, and for our team backwards as well. So as there are contributions we could make if that was something that would work, then
yes, we would. If what you already have done, if there's a way we can bring that into Ortelius, we would love to do that. And it's pretty open. All of we've built a pretty it's all based on APIs in terms of getting to the data and we do a pretty extensive versioning process though, because we are thinking about how components are versioned and then how applications are versioned. So I don't know how that would impact you, but we do a pretty extensive versioning process. We basically built a versioning engine for configuration data, any kind of configuration data.
So definitely, we're happy to set up a follow-on, and
I'll do is I'll ping you for a meeting the week of June 19th then.
Yeah, either the 19th or the 26th. I'm on vacation then for the first 2 weeks of July, but either one of those 2 weeks.
I'll shoot for just because you're going to be trying to bring in a larger group of people, I'll shoot for the week of the 26th. Generally, what's better for your teams? What day of the week is better for your team? Do you have a day that you have a lot of meetings?
I'm going to say definitely not Thursday, not Friday. So what times is we could shoot for this time on either I know we're trying to do an end user meeting on the 26th, 27th, or 28th of June, but we could
well, what is the week of the 19th look at? What does like the Thursday the 22nd look like?
Is Thursday, that's the governing board meeting. Is that preference for you? Thursdays? Is Thursday preference?
Thursday, it doesn't really matter to us. We can always reschedule things. Right now, there is a CDF online meetup that we're doing at 9 o'clock Mountain Time. I'm not sure what time that is for you, but that's 2 hours earlier than now. Probably Wednesday the 21st would be a little better.
Okay, so that looks okay. Yeah, what?
Want to do 10? Want to do 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock. Which time zone?
It would be noon Eastern. We can do earlier too. We could do
noon. Yeah, no, that's fine. That would work. Yeah.
Okay. I will.
When the 21st. When is the 21st? Yeah, that would work fine.
Wednesday the 21st at noon Eastern. I will book that. I do have a 15-minute call that I can't change, but Steve can start the meeting and I can start late.
Yeah, perfect.
No problem. All right, we will do that. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool.
Thank you so very much for being open to the idea of sharing information. I appreciate it from an open source perspective. It's so critical for us.
Yeah, it is. Again, none of what we're doing is unique. It's standard across the board. So the more people involved in these things, the faster capabilities and integrations are rolled out, and it's a win-win for everybody.
It is unique in that you've gotten so far. everybody's starting to talk about how do you manage all of the evidence, as you call it. And it's interesting you use that term because I've been calling it evidence for quite some time. But the forensics around what we do can be extremely important. And in my world, when I think about it, if we could begin building that kind of forensics around all of the open source tools that we're using, then we have some real data to start playing with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every organization as a island, we don't get a broad enough picture of what's occurring. So
yeah,
100%, in the future, it'd be great to have a central hub of all that information.
Yeah, it would, yeah, because and once you start getting into it, it's just use cases just keep coming.
I know. I
know. That's the thing. It's like someone else comes like production support was, well, it originally started for us. It started out as like regulations, right? So how do we do audit internal and external regulated applications, and snowballing now to here, this persona, that persona, the other persona, and even like say, from a finance or from a workforce perspective, like how do we know that we're getting value for what we invest in teams, and are we sure the time that's been spent by people? And I didn't think of the contractor one where you might be paying an external body for work, and do you know if you're getting value for money, yes or no?
Yeah, that was the first question they asked us. How could we track that? We were like, we can put it in there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure actually we could probably answer that question now. But anyway, it is interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So Fatih, Ajur, and the Ortelius team, thank you everybody for this conversation. And I will schedule a follow-up meeting for June 21st, noon Eastern.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Super interesting.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
All right.